Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Very warm good morning to everyone. I welcome you all to today's session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. To be true, you should be welcoming me because I am here after some time, not the other way around. But I'm glad that all of you have been maintaining this habit of attending all these live sessions that start at 10 a.m. to give you the most insightful knowledge about the Hindu newspaper. Today also we will be discussing the most important articles from the Hindu newspaper today, and we'll end the session with a couple of mains practice questions. However, before we begin, there's a very important announcement for all of you. We are now giving you a chance to get 3 days of unlimited access on our app. So the app that we have, most of the features are reserved for our paid students. For example, attending our live classes, seeing the recorded version of the classes, attending quizzes, and a whole lot of other features are only accessible to our paid students. However, we are now opening up our app for all of you for a 3-day limited time period. The link to register is given in the pinned comment section. Just register there and enjoy this app with full access for 3 days. See how the classes go on. You can also see the recorded version of the earlier classes. Make sure that you take full advantage of this as well. Now, these are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. From the mains examination point of view, we'll be discussing 4 topics. First, the problem of the Dalit Christians. So those Dalits who converted to Christianity, what are the issues that they are facing? Mainly the issue being that they are not being given the advantage of being a scheduled caste. So while people who are Dalit and are still Hindus, they have access to the reservation benefits that have been given to them under the law. However, when Dalits convert to Christianity, they lose out on these benefits, and this demand has been made by this community for a long time. Second article that we'll be discussing is about India's judicial data. It has been released by the government's Daksh portal. Daksh portal, as you know, gives a lot of data mainly about high courts in India. This data tells us how many cases are pending in the high courts, especially the status of bail appeals. Why is it that many courts are facing a huge pending number of cases? What is it that the pandemic has got to play in this? Third, we'll be discussing about the bulldozing of law. As you know, there's a new term that has emerged in our political discussion, something called bulldozer justice. A lot of governments have opted for using bulldozers. The justification is that they are only destroying those buildings, those apartments which were illegal earlier. But is it as per the law? Is it the way forward to deliver justice in the society? This is what we'll be discussing. Fourth, we'll be discussing how India's Defense Ministry is opting for its own India-made operating system called the Maya operating system in place of Microsoft Windows. Why is it that Microsoft Windows is no longer considered as a safe option for our Defense Ministry? From prelims examination point of view, we have a couple of topics. First, from the front page of the Hindu newspaper, there is something called the PM Usha scheme, which is a scheme for taking care of higher education in India. However, the problem is a lot of states, almost half of the states in India, are still to join this scheme. And in the end, we have a science related news, that is metagenome sequencing technology and how it is transforming our attempt to make sure that future diseases, future pandemics such as the COVID-19 crisis is already curtailed. So let's not delay any further. Let's jump right into the first article that we have. The first article that you see on the screen is the conundrum being faced by the Dalit Christians. Let me give you a very simple background of what this issue is and where do we stand right now. As you know, the Dalit community for many decades, in fact for many centuries, has faced discrimination at the hands of the people in the society. Dalits have been discriminated against, be it where can they live, what occupations can they take up, where can they get educated. We still have many places in India where Dalits are not allowed to take part in weddings, where they are not allowed to go to public places. Even how Dalit weddings will take place, that is also restricted in certain areas, in certain societies. So what happened was, in order to go away from this discrimination, many people from the Dalit community thought that if they convert to some other religion and they don't remain a part of the Hindu religion anymore, maybe they will not face that discrimination. So many of the Dalits over the past few decades have converted to different religions. Many of them have converted to Buddhism, many of them have converted to Sikhism, and many of them have even converted to Christianity. This is where the problem starts. The problem is, for the Dalit community and for their upliftment, the main provision that the government has ensured is reservation. As you know, reservation benefits are given to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. Now, the reservation benefits to scheduled castes that is given to the Dalits, they are not applicable to those Dalits that convert to Christianity. This is where the problem starts. So once a Dalit converts to Christianity, he or she cannot claim the reservation benefits that were given to him or her under the reservation laws in India. Now the problem here is, just because a person has converted to the other religion, that does not mean that his or her past or the discrimination ends overnight. So why is it that you are taking away the reservation benefits? That still remains a matter of great concern. There have been multiple reports, there have been multiple committees that have been formed, and time again multiple committees have suggested and recommended to the government that the Dalit Christians should be given their due right of reservation. But the government for some reason has not been in favor of this. Let me give you a few examples. There is something called the K.G. Balakrishnan Committee. K.G. Balakrishnan, a former Chief Justice of India. Last year, the committee gave a report saying that Dalit Christians should be given the scheduled caste status. In fact, recently, Tamil Nadu Assembly just passed a resolution to amend the 1950 presidential order. Now, this is very interesting. We'll discuss about this in just a bit of detail. The problem here is, states do not have the power to include a certain community in the scheduled caste list or in the scheduled tribe list. So for example, if a certain demand is made at the state level, and there have been many demands made in the past as well. I'm sure you would remember the OBC demand mainly, for example, Marathas in Maharashtra. There was this Patel community demand in Gujarat. There was also demand, for example, from the Jat community in Haryana. There have been multiple such agitations that have started in different states, but the problem is, it is not in the hands of the state to take that decision. Ultimately, it has to be taken at the central government level. So what the state government can do at best is, they can just pass a resolution. This is what the Tamil Nadu Assembly did. A resolution was adopted. Now I'm sure all of you would know, resolution does not have the force of law. Law is enforceable in the court. Resolutions are not enforceable. For example, just imagine, whenever the new year starts, you make a new year resolution, right? That this year I'll go to the gym every single day. This year I'll study 10 hours every single day. Just imagine if those resolutions had a force of law and someone could go to the court against you because you did not fulfill that resolution. So just understand, resolution just shows that you intend to do this. This is what you mean to do, but it does not have a force of law. So if the Tamil Nadu Assembly adopted a resolution, that doesn't mean that they have the power to give this right of reservation to certain community. It just means that they can ask or they can try to convince the central government to go ahead and do this. So they cannot do this, they can just show their intention of doing this. Ultimately, it has to be done through the amending of the 1950 presidential order, and I'll just come to this presidential order in just a bit. Apart from this K.G. Balakrishnan Committee, we also had the Justice Ranganath Mishra Commission in 2007. They also had recommended that we should permit those Dalits who have converted to Christianity to get reservation benefits. I'll tell you the reason why this is odd. The reason why this is odd is, if a Dalit converts to other religions, for example, let's say Buddhism, Sikhism, they still have the right to get reservation benefits. It is when they convert to Christianity that the reservation benefits are lost. So this is the discrimination that we are focusing on. The other part of the story is, Indian laws mainly work on single axis framework. Now, what do you mean by single axis framework? When you say the word Dalit Christians, you are actually giving two different identities to a same person. For example, let's say there is a minority women or a women belonging to the minority community, or let's say there is a person who is handicapped and belongs to the minority community, something like that. The problem is Indian laws don't really focus on multiple identities. They just focus on one single identity. So for example, there are laws of reservation for Dalits, for tribals, but the laws don't focus on if a person belongs to multiple communities and is handicapped from the multiple sides. So there is no law as such for Dalit Christians, no specific law for minority women. There may be laws for minority, there may be different laws for women. There may be different laws for those who are handicapped, there may be different laws from those who are from the minority community. So our laws mainly are formed on single access framework, meaning that those people who identify themselves in more than one ways, for them these laws are not ideally made. The problem with those, for example, who have converted to Christianity to escape the discrimination is they are now being discriminated on both the sides. So most of these Dalit Christians who have converted to Christianity, they are still facing discrimination in the Christian community as well. Many of them are still not allowed to visit churches. Many of them are told that no, your churches will be separate, you can't take part in this congregation. So they are facing discrimination on both sides of the spectrum. One, they are not getting the reservation benefits that they are entitled to so that their future can be better, and they are still facing discrimination in the new community which they entered hoping that this discrimination tag would go away from them. Now, why is it that the government does not allow this reservation benefit to be given to Dalit Christians? The government says Dalit Christian itself is an oxymoron. You know what's an oxymoron? Oxymoron means two words joined together but they're actually opposite to each other. So two words that are actually joined which are opposite to each other. For example, some of you may agree to an example like this. A few years back, Pakistan started this logic at the international stage that there are people who are good terrorists. So whenever India takes up this issue of terrorism with Pakistan, Pakistan says, oh, there are some terrorists who are good terrorists, there are some terrorists who are bad terrorists. There is nothing called a good terrorist. That is an oxymoron. There is nothing called a good terrorist. Similarly, as per many experts and the government, there is nothing called Dalit Christians. Why? Because as per experts, within Christianity, there is no caste system. Since there is no caste system within Christianity, how can you say that there are certain people who are Dalits and who are Christians? This is why the government has still not agreed to give them this tag of reservation which they deserve in their point of view. Now, this single access framework, as I said, Indian laws being one-dimensional, Indian laws being only applicable to community who belongs with or who has been identified with one single identity. This has been used even by the judiciary. For example, in 1985, there was a case called Sosai, etc. versus the Union of India and others. Now, who was this person? This was a Dalit Catholic shoemaker, means again a Dalit Christian. The case went to the Supreme Court in which the person was arguing that he should be given the right to set up a kiosk. Kiosk means basically a temporary shop. He should be allowed to set up a temporary shop on a platform in Madras, just like other people have been allowed to, so that it is proven that he is at par with the Hindu shoemakers. He said that the government should allow me also the space to go and make sure that I also set up my shop at a similar platform. He said that I am being discriminated against. However, the court said that no, this cannot be done. The court said it is necessary to establish that even after you have converted to Christianity, you still face discrimination. If you don't face discrimination, you cannot argue that you have the right to reservation. So in other words, this shoemaker was demanding a right of reservation that I should also be given a place at par with the others, even though I might not have the money, even though I might not have the resources, but I need that reservation. However, the court said that no, now that you have converted to some other religion, now you first have to prove that even after converting, you still face these discriminations, you still face these disabilities. Only and only then we would be able to grant you this. So this concept of single access framework, laws being only applicable to one single identity and not multiple identities, has been used not just by the government but even by the judiciary in the past. Now, a few important sets of information apart from what has been written in this article. This article mentions the 2007 Ranganathan report. Now, this report in itself is extremely important because this report has been asked and can be quoted time and time again. This report or this commission mainly was formed to look into the question of those Dalits who have converted to other religions. Should they also be given the right of reservation? What should the government do to benefit their social status? Now, Dalit Christians and Muslims face discrimination from those religions where they have converted and from the existing system as well. So they are getting the bad end of the bargain in both the sides. The exclusion of Dalits who convert to Christianity and Islam from the scheduled caste category is a violation of their right to equality. This is what the report had said. This is what the report had said. The report said that just because they convert to Islam or Christianity does not mean that they should lose their right of reservation. The commission said that the scheduled caste status of Dalit converts to Christianity and to those who have converted to Islam will lead to their socio-economic development, and denying them the reservation rights is a violation of their fundamental rights. So this report wholeheartedly supported this idea that even those Dalits who have converted to Christianity or Islam should get the reservation benefits. What did the government say? Not interested. The government did not accept this recommendation. Government said that no, we are happy in the current status. Now also, coming back to what is the highlight of this article, that is the Constitutional Order of 1950. Now what exactly is this? This is a presidential order given at the beginning of the Constitution. This order specifically mentions who are the caste community who shall be given the reservation benefits. So there is a constitutional order for scheduled caste, for scheduled tribe, for backward classes, etc. Now, this order came into being with the beginning of the Constitution. This order said only Hindus can be recognized as scheduled caste because it was considered it is only in the Hindu religion that the problem of untouchability has existed in the past. The order also said that every member of certain other sects such as Ramdasi, Kabir Panthi, Mazhabi, Silkigar caste who reside in Punjab or Patiala or East Punjab, all of this is now today's Punjab only, can also be deemed to be a member of scheduled caste whether they are from Hindu or from Sikh religion. Because as you know, from our religion also different sects have originated in the past, they still keep on originating in today's time also. Many of the people who might seem to be following Hindu religion, for example, demand that no, they follow a different part of religion, they should be recognized as such in the caste census. However, in the beginning in 1950, only these were to be given the scheduled caste status. The order was amended in 1956 to include Dalits who have converted to Sikhism, and again in 1990 for those Dalits who have converted to Buddhism. Why? Because of a recommendation given by Kaka Kalilkar Commission in 1955, and then in 1983 again a high panel commission had suggested the same. However, again this does not include those Dalits who have converted to Islam or Christianity. And this is the entire fight because they have been deprived of their reservation benefits so far. This was our first article for the day. The second article is data heavy, based on a lot of graphs and this chart given. It's an article where data has been derived from the Daksh High Court portal, where information has been given about the pending cases in the high courts in India, what is the pendency, how many bail petitions especially are pending, and how has this progressed in the past few years. Basically, in simple terms, let me first tell you what to remember, what not to remember. See, it's very difficult to remember the exact data. You might remember this today, but I know by the time that you start to appear in your mains examination, from today till then it will be a long time, you might not really remember all this data that you are now reading. My suggestion always is, if you can remember data, excellent, nothing like that. But if you can't remember the data, try and remember the trends. When I say trends means, is it increasing, is it decreasing, why is it increasing or why is it decreasing, or some data that is easier to remember. Go ahead with that. The more data that you try to cramp up from now onwards, it will be very difficult for you to retain that in your memory. So take a pick of some important data, focus more on the trends, whether the data is increasing or decreasing, that will be much better. So the trend mainly is that post 2020, a lot of new cases have come up in India's high courts, mainly the number of bail appeals. A lot of people have applied for bail in the high court. Now, this data at the Daksh portal just gives you numbers. How many cases are pending, how many bail petitions have come up. They don't give you the reason. Why is it that that number of cases have increased or decreased? So that is something that you have to interpret yourself. The author here says that one logical conclusion here is that 2020 was the year of the pandemic. A lot of people were punished, FIRs were filed against them because they were not adhering to the order of the government. Remember the lockdown restrictions? When we had the lockdown restrictions, a lot of people had it very hard to sit at home. They just left home just to see what is happening all around. They went on long drives even when it was not allowed. Many people were just running away from the police. We are not sitting at home. So many people were booked for lockdown violations. That is why, as per the author, again this is an assumption, that is why a lot more number of bail appeals were filed. Bail appeals went from around 3.2 lakh to 3.5 lakh each year before 2020 to over 4 lakh after 2020. That is the difference that we see after the pandemic arrived. Again, this is an assumption that the author is making. This is not a government assumption. The government has not clarified the reason for that. The government has just told that the number of cases and the number of bail pending appeals especially has increased. Now, the problem here is the bail appeals have more than 30% of caseload between July 2021 and June 2022. See, the problem is, in India, we have overpopulated prisons. Most of our prisons run at a capacity much higher than what they're intended to. So if there's a prison that is meant to keep 100 people, it will keep 140, 150 people, even more in certain cases. What it leads to is that wherever you had to lock up only one person, you're locking up more than one people. So the possibility of people fighting, the possibility of violence within the jail has increased, and we have seen what has happened in the past few years. Every few weeks, every few months, you read a story about something happening in Tihar. The people who are caught inside the prisoners, they are fighting amongst themselves, many of them being killed. All of that is a result of overpopulation of prisons. Most of our prisoners, in fact, a huge majority of the prisoners in India are actually those who are under trials. Under trial means those people on whom the crime has not even been proven. One of the reasons why they are still in the jail is that they cannot take up bail. Why? Either they don't have a good enough lawyer to represent them, either there is no one to actually give a surety bond for their bail, because in most cases, in many cases, when you have to go out on a bail, there is a security amount that you have to deposit. Maybe you can't do that. Because of all of these reasons, there is an urgent need to have bail reforms in the country. This is why this article is important for all of you. Again, even if you can't remember the exact data, that is not really a problem, but just understand the trend that we are going in the opposite direction. The number of bail cases that are pending are increasing rather than decreasing in the past few years. This is the data, as you can see. From 2020 onwards, the number of appeals for bail have increased. This data also shows, on an average, how many days does it take for a high court to decide on the bail appeal. Now, bail appeals usually are those that do not take a lot of time. Please understand, when we say cases go on for 10 years, 12 years, those are proper cases. Bail appeals are those appeals where all the facts have already been established. There is no new fact. It is just interpretation, where maybe the district court did not give you the bail, you go to the high court and high court will look into the facts and will give you the bail. In many cases, the bails are given within 1 or 2 hearings. That is why for a bail appeal, if it is pending for even 30 days, even that is a long time. Bail appeals are either not given, or if the bail is given, there is no reason for the bail to actually not be given or denied for a long time. But even then, there are many high courts in India where bail appeal takes a long time just to be heard. In Odisha, it's about 61 days on an average. Bombay High Court 56 days, Jammu and Kashmir 156 days. So all in all, there is a lot of improvement that needs to be done. Over here, I want to share with you one more very important report that was published this year only, although it was last year's version, the Indian Justice Report. This report is a work of multiple organizations working together, including the Daksh portal. The Daksh portal of high courts, which has given all this data that we just discussed, they, along with multiple other organizations, have come up with a report called the Indian Justice Report. In this report, I want to highlight 2 very important factors that they discuss about. First, they discuss about the lack of judges in India, especially at the high court level. In December 2022, the sanctioned strength, that is, how many judges in the high courts in total there should be in India, was 1108, but the number of judges was 778, so about 30% shortage. Subordinate courts, where the strength has to be over 24,600, had about 19,300 judges. Again, there is a lump sum 20% or so vacancy here as well. A direct impact of this is the rise in the number of pending cases. At the high court level, if you can see, Uttar Pradesh has the highest average pendency, where one case on an average can take over 11 years. Now imagine cases where you go file a case in the court hoping to get justice today, tomorrow, after a few months, and you get justice after over 11 years. It's easy to say that it's better to get justice rather than injustice, even if it takes a long time. But the reality is, justice delayed is justice denied in most of the cases. We have seen so many stories where decisions are given even after the person has died. The one strong way in which you can decrease crime in the society is by setting an example. That if you commit a crime, you will be given punishment immediately. When you put that fear into the minds of the people, that is the best way to stop people from committing a crime. But with these pending numbers, that is obviously not happening. The lowest average high court pendency is in Tripura, Sikkim and Meghalaya. Part of the reason is that they also have lesser number of cases. See, the number of cases being filed obviously depends upon the population. So when you have lesser number of cases, the pendency will be lower. When you have higher population, like in the case of Uttar Pradesh, you will obviously have more pending cases. But the answer to that has to be longer working hours, has to be lesser vacation, and obviously has to be more judges in the courts. Also, since this question or this article is based on bails, we have discussed this earlier also many times. There are different types of bails that exist in our system. There is something called the regular bail, which is given to a person who is in the police custody. There is interim bail. Interim bail is given for a short time. It's not a full-term bail. It's given till the time that the hearing starts. So the hearing is going on. The judge says, I have not decided on the final order, but for that time period, for some time, I am giving you a bail. Anticipatory bail is given before your arrest. So even before your arrest, if you think that the police might come and arrest you, before that you take the bail. That is called anticipatory bail. If you remember, a few weeks back, we did discuss about something called the default bail as well. I hope you remember this. If not, please revise. Let me know in the comment section below what is the default bail. We have discussed this earlier as well. The next article that we have here is based on a recent phenomena that is now being seen in multiple states across the country. People know it by different names. Some people call it the bulldozer law, some people call it the bulldozer justice, some people call it instant justice, or whatever you want to call it. The idea is, whenever we see any illegal activity, you see that just a few days later, the government will send bulldozers to raze down the property of allegedly those people who were involved there. This brings cheer in some people's mind, and this brings a concern to the minds of the other people. The people who believe that the government is doing the right thing by giving instant justice, they are obviously extremely happy about this. We just saw cases in high courts can take over 10 years, so people believe that this is the best way to go forward, instant justice. On the other hand, the other people are concerned about this activity, this practice, because this is not the rule of law. Any developed country, any developed society at the end of the day is based on the rule of law. What do you mean by rule of law? Rule of law is simple. A country has to be run by law and not by people. If the law says that if someone is involved in a crime, the case will go to the court will decide the punishment, that is the way forward. If you don't like it, if you think that no, this is a very long process, we want to just send bulldozers, then you have to change the law for that. Write this in the law, that tomorrow if the government feels, if the government thinks that you are involved somewhere, the government will send bulldozers. If that becomes a law, then you are well within your rights to go ahead and do this. But until that becomes a law, when you randomly decide, that is not the definition of rule of law. This brings to the light a lot of ethical questions. Is it right in doing this, or is it the government's intention that the government does not want people from the certain community, people from certain background to actually raise their voice? Now, as I said, this activity has happened in multiple states. It's not one single state now. What is different this time is that for the first time a high court has actually interfered. So far, most of the courts have sat quietly, did not say anything against any of these practices. But now, after the recent incident in Nuh district in Haryana, as you know, the Haryana government sent certain bulldozers to raze down property of people who were allegedly involved. Punjab and Haryana High Court interfered, saying that this should stop, and the government cannot randomly send bulldozers wherever they want. If the government really believes that there's a certain property that is illegally built, then the law says you have to give certain number of days as a notice period to those who are occupying that property. You cannot overnight send something to destroy that property. Even if it is illegal, there has to be a rule that has to be followed. There has to be certain time period, there has to be certain notice period that is given. The court also used the term ethnic cleansing. Now, this is a very, very, very serious word. Ethnic cleansing. In India, we do not have a definition of what is ethnic cleansing. Around the world, however, whenever there are issues of, let's say, civil war, whenever there are issues of people being killed in large numbers, we refer to this term called ethnic cleansing. In simple terms, ethnic cleansing means an attack on one single community, an attempt to make sure that one single community's population either reduces or it actually gets over. Many times it is sponsored by the government in many of these countries where civil wars are happening. Many times it's not government sponsored or supported, but the government sits as a silent spectator. This question has been asked by the Punjab and Haryana High Court, that is it not a form of ethnic cleansing? The court asked this question of the government to respond. Now, as I said, ethnic cleansing is not something that has been defined in India anywhere, but it's a term that is used time and time again whenever we have any religion or caste-based riots. The High Court also said that this demolition order was carried out without giving any notice period, and it is a violation of article number 21. I'm sure all of you have read how the Supreme Court has expanded the scope of article 21 over the decades. It includes a lot of things now, such as the right to livelihood. It also includes the right to safe travel. It even includes the right to sleep. All of these are now a part of article 21. And the court says that this is something that the government has not been following in this case. The government should follow the rule of law and not rule by law. What is the difference between the two? The rule of law, as I just said, is a simple idea that any country, any society has to work as per the law. If you don't like the law, then change the law, rather than just doing whatever you want. If you think that the justice system or judicial system in India takes a lot of time, it has a lot of pending cases, then change that system. Bring in reforms. Make sure that there are more judges that are involved, rather than just randomly thinking that now I will decide that punishment will be given by this manner, or I will give punishment to people in some other way. That is what rule of law is. On the other hand, rule by law is what is happening right now. That is the government deciding randomly what should be the punishment given in what cases. That is not how a developed society works. In fact, as per the author, there are many high-level ministers sitting at very, very important positions who have openly supported these kind of activities. The suggestion is that the Election Commission of India should take note of those people who are making such statements. This cannot be a remedy in the form of making sure that there is instant justice that is delivered. In the form of instant justice, you cannot target one specific set of people, because again, if you thought that the property was illegal, first you could have taken action before. Secondly, if you still want to take action, there is again a set of rules for that. Either change the law and make sure the law says that as soon as any property is found to be illegal, we will destroy that right away. Then it is fine. But as long as that is not a law, you have to follow what the rule of law is. In 2019, our Chief Justice of India famously said, justice must never take the form of revenge. But that is what is happening now. Finally, at least one High Court has spoken up against this. We'll have to see whether this becomes a trend and other High Courts also speak up against this. Now, this practice, again, I just said earlier, I'll repeat that, it finds many supporters. Many people still cheer what is happening in different states in the form of instant justice or bulldozer justice or instant encounters, etc. However, there are a lot of ethical concerns attached with this. It is a violation of due process of law. Due process of law simply means the law that has been established, you have to ensure that the law is followed. Any developed society is run by the written law and not by random people. Because if you want people in power to randomly decide, you are going back to the ancient era where the ruler, the king used to have all the powers, where the king used to decide, oh, I'll cut down the arms, I'll cut down the legs, because that was not the rule of law and you don't want to go back to that era. It's an infringement of rights, as we just discussed. Article 21 has been infringed. Lack of transparency. On what basis is the decision being taken? Are you taking decisions on the basis of certain facts, or randomly deciding which property to destroy, which property not to destroy? There is potential for the misuse of power, as it is being alleged by many people, and there is loss of public trust as well. Because again, public or the people trust the government because they know that the government is run as per the law. But once you have a feeling that the laws are not being followed, that the government is deciding randomly who to punish, who not to punish, that leads to lack of trust in the government as well. Next important news is coming from the Defense Ministry. India as a whole, Defense Ministry specifically, over the past few decades has been facing a lot of cyber threats. Now, cyber threats depend on a lot of things. It depends on the kind of machines that you're using, the kind of internet connection that you have. It also depends on the kind of operating system that you have in your machines. Those who are familiar with using laptops or mobile phones, you would know that it is usually considered that if you compare, let's say, Windows with iOS, iOS is the operating system that Apple uses. It is considered as Windows is not as safe as iOS, that is the Apple's operating system. Because Windows, in the name of allowing easier access, in the name of allowing easier applicability, it allows connections to be formed from multiple places. That is why when you see any Apple ad, if you notice, they sell their products based on the concept that our devices are much more secure, your data is much more private when you use Apple platforms. Similar to the case of what Apple is doing, the government has also realized that using Microsoft Windows may not be the best way forward. And in order to secure our systems, we have to have our own operating system, and that is what has happened. So India, especially the Defense Ministry, is now ditching the Windows and we are switching to a new operating system called the Maya operating system. It's indigenously built by India itself. It's not based on Windows, it's based on Linux. It's based on Linux. Linux is considered as a much more safer operating system. Some of you, maybe if you are from an engineering background, you might have used Linux, you might still be using Linux in some of your laptops. Linux is considered a much more safer operating system, not as compatible as Windows. You might not be able to use a lot of outside external apps on Linux as you do on Windows, but Linux, on the other hand, considered as extremely safe, much safer than Windows. So based on the Linux operating system, we have built our own new operating system called Maya. This is being now used by our Defense Ministry, all the systems. Later on, it will also be extended to all the armed forces as well. Navy has already started it. After Navy, Army and the Air Force will also get the permission, and their systems will also now have the new operating system, that is the Maya operating system. It's based on Linux, it's built locally, built only in India. It's also backed up by a protection system called Chakravyuh. Chakravyuh again is a set of protocols that Government of India with CERT in has been working on so that we are much better prepared against any cyber attacks in the future. If you remember, in the past few years, we have seen multiple cyber attacks, cyber threats. And it's not just India. Even the most developed, most advanced countries in the world have been facing these problems. Look at the US, look at China, look at Russia. In India, there are multiple examples. We all saw the AIMS attack a few months back, where AIMS database was hacked. We have seen other attacks as well in the past on our power grids in cities such as Mumbai also. So the Government of India feels that the more that we build within India, the more indigenous technology that we have, the better it would be. Because right now, all the critical key infrastructure that we have, including nuclear, including space, including defense, all of these are somewhere based on all these computers that are working together, and they are susceptible to these attacks. So this is one way of going forward, ditching the Windows and opting for the Maya OS. Now, usually, I do not expect at least that the UPSC will go as deep as asking you difference between what Windows is, what Linux is, because that will be too technical. That will be heavily in favor of those who come from an engineering background. So if you're not from an engineering background, you don't have to worry without going a lot deep into what is Windows, what is Linux, how are they different from each other. Just understand the basic differences. As I said, Linux regarded as much more safer, not as compatible with external apps. Windows, much more open, much more easier to use, but that also brings in the factor of susceptibility. Now, the devices that are usually, or most devices in the world anyways, are run on Windows operating system, that is run by Microsoft. It is based on Windows NT kernel. Now what exactly is a kernel? Kernel is that core of that operating system. It's a set of instructions that tell the operating system what to do. For example, when you're starting the Windows, where do you click, what will happen with your right click, what will happen with your left click, double click, what should happen with every single action that you're doing on the screen, that is added by the kernel. Now these kernel designs have been changing over the years to make your systems better. For example, we used to have this Windows XP, then we used to have Windows 2007, 2009, 10, etc. All these Windows and new versions that come up have an improved and different kernel system. The kernel system similarly for Apple Mac OS is different, that is used on their own laptops. Their kernel system is called XNU. Ubuntu, that is a Linux operating system, that has a different kernel. So the main differences between how these operating system works is based on the kernel. That is the main unit based on which the operating systems work. Again, if you are not familiar with these terminologies, you don't have to lose your sleep over it. I do not think it's as important. The UPSC will not go too deep into asking all of these questions. Anyways, let's come back. Now, cyber threats or malware has become a reality in today's life, and not just in India, but even in the most developed countries around the world. Earlier also we had discussed the example of the Colonial Pipeline in US, a huge oil and gas company, how their entire system was hacked by the hackers, where they started demanding ransom in the form of cryptocurrency. With the rise in cryptocurrency, it has become much easier for the hackers to now take money in exchange for doing all of this. That is why the countries around the world are trying to safeguard their critical infrastructure as much as possible. And India is now also doing the same. It's not just India. Many countries around the world are trying to develop their own apps, especially the ones that are used by the government. They're also trying to make sure that their own operating systems operate in the government systems. Over here, let me give you one small interesting homework. You have to tell me in the comment section, when the Prime Minister of India, for example, our Prime Minister has an online meeting, they had the online SEO summit, or whenever they have an online meeting, do they also use Jio, Airtel, Vodafone like we do, or do they have a different kind of a network? Do they also use their own version of Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp call when they want to have a video call? Do they also use the same network like we have, like you have, or do they have a different version of it which you and me, we don't have access to? Let me know in the comment section. Let's see if you actually identify that. What is that system all about? What is that used for? Is it the same that is open to public or not? Now, at the global level, there are many initiatives taken for cyber security purposes. For example, one of them famously is called the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. India is not a signatory to this. It started in 2004 about the countries coming together, sharing information about hackers, about these kind of problems, sharing investigating techniques, increasing cooperation, helping each other if the countries find out something new. We also have the Internet Governance Forum. Again, at the international level, many countries have formed this forum where internet governance debates happen, what kind of rights to be given to people, should the people be given entire freedom on the net or not. The General Assembly of the UN has also passed certain reforms, hoping that the countries around the world would work together to ensure there is free exchange of information in terms of cyber crimes. Now we have a couple of important news stories from the prelims examination point of view. The first one coming in from the front page of the Hindu newspaper, which says that 14 states have still not joined the PM USHA program. Now, what exactly is this? How does it work? Let's see. The simple idea is 14 states and union territories have not joined this PM USHA program that is run by the Union Education Ministry. What is this program? It is called the Pradhan Mantri Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan. Basically, in simple terms, the government of India wants to improve higher education in states across the country, for which the government of India will give additional budget for improving the infrastructure of colleges and universities. The money will be used for scholarships, building research labs, building better infrastructure, etc. That is the entire idea, PMUSHA. Why have many states not signed? Because many states are saying that it is not a scheme where government is giving the entire budget. Remember, there is central sector scheme, there is centrally sponsored scheme. So it's a central sponsored scheme. The government of India, central government is not giving 100% budget. The government of India will only give 60% budget. And they expect the states to give the remaining 40%. This is where the problem starts. The states say we don't have money. You are anyways not giving us enough money from the GST. Whatever promises you made earlier, you did not fulfill that because of the pandemic. And now how can you expect us to actually spend more money? Not just this, central government also wants the state governments to sign an MOU saying that they will implement the national education policy. As you know, national education policy has brought in a lot of new changes. Center government wants the state to implement that. States are not doing that as well. Why? Because even for national education policy, the government is giving no new budget. The central government just wants this to be implemented, but without any extra funds to be given. This is why both of these things are stuck. Number one, the PM Usha scheme is stuck. Why? Because the state governments say that we can't provide 40% budget. If you really want us to implement, if you really care for our higher education, why don't you give 100% budget? Second, central government wants the state to sign the MOUs to implement national education policy. They are not doing that as well. Why? Because no extra budget has been provided for that as well. The central government says that new education policy will change the education landscape of India, but the state governments say that we need more money for that, we need more infrastructure. Only and only then we would be able to give a push to vocational training, we would be able to give a push to research, etc., which is mandated in the national education policy. This is why it is still stuck in between the two. As far as the PM Usha scheme is concerned, if you remember earlier, the government used to have a similar scheme called RUSA, Rashtriya Uttar Shiksha Abhiyan. It's just a renaming of that. The UGC is implementing that, that is the University Grants Commission. They have been trying to talk to the states on a one-on-one basis, trying to see if the states agree to some flexibility or not, talking to states whether they can implement some features, if not all of them, how much money do they need, from where can they get the budget requirements, etc. But the politics of the country is so divided that if you look at the list of 14 states and UTs that have not implemented this, most of these, in fact all of these, are the ones that are non-BJP states. So it's not just about the budget. Apart from the budget also, there are many states who don't implement the central government scheme because it's mostly about that, no, we will implement our own scheme, it's our subject, it's a concurrent list subject, so we will decide how education will work, we will not implement your scheme, and that becomes a problem. I'll give you another example. You all know about the Ayushman Bharat Yojana. Under Ayushman Bharat Yojana, people would be given the medical insurance by the government. Many states did not implement the Ayushman Bharat Yojana. Why? For example, West Bengal did not implement it. Why? They said that no, we'll have our own scheme. So when you have different parties at the center and at the state, it does become a problem where the state governments don't want to implement the scheme that are run or are advised by the center government, and this is what is happening here as well. A bit of detail about the PM USHA scheme. It aims to work with 300 state universities and colleges. Again, the focus is only on higher education, not on school education. It was launched in 2013 to give more funding to higher education institutions, to give research access, to give scholarships to the students, to start new programs. The idea is to bring India's higher education system at par with the global level, because you know, whenever you look at the global rankings, most of our universities or colleges don't feature there. There are just a few handful of those. And it is an indication that our education system, especially the higher education system, needs a push, and this is what the government is trying to do here. Last article for today is based on metagenome sequencing, which has become extremely famous these days. I'm sure all of you have heard about genome sequencing. Now, what exactly is genome sequencing? Let me try and explain this to you in as simple terms as possible. So when there is a new virus that comes up and we have to develop a vaccine against that virus or a medicine against that virus, we have to first understand the structure of that virus. How is it made up? So what we do is we have to identify how exactly are they made, what are the building components of that virus. In simple terms, this is called genome sequencing. Now, viruses are not that easy, or viruses, bacteria, etc. They are not that easy to just dissect. You can't just take them up and break them open and see what is inside of it or not. It requires a lot of high-scale sophisticated technique to go ahead and see whether we can identify the exact sequencing, because only when you identify the exact sequences of the structure can you make a vaccine against it. Remember, even today we see news stories that a new variant of COVID-19 has come up. When you say new variant, what do you mean by that? New variant means a variant of that virus with a slightly changed structure, with a slightly changed genome structure. So this is where the genome sequence is extremely important. It is considered mainly as a first step to fight against any new virus, any new microbe, because only then you can develop a vaccine or a medicine against it. This is an emerging technology, and in fact this is why we were able to break all the records as the world and bring a COVID-19 vaccine within a few months. If you look at any disease that has happened earlier, on an average developing a vaccine took close to 10 years, on an average. There have been many vaccines developed even more than 10 years later, the disease coming up. But with COVID-19, within a few months, there were multiple vaccines around the world. Why? It was made possible because of the metagenomics. It is extremely rapid. It helps us identify the genome sequencing of the virus. When we know that a certain person has been infected, we can take the virus from that person, the infected samples, and we can actually see how to fight against this virus. The good part is that the entire world, not just India, multiple countries have come together and have shared data about genome sequencing of the virus, allowing us to make sure that we can learn from each other. This is what happened with the COVID-19 crisis as well. Around the world, scientists actually discovered their own idea of the genome sequence of the COVID-19 virus. They shared it with each other on a shared directory, and that is how the genome sequencing of COVID-19 was found out so easily. There was a very popular online portal called the COVID-Sec Essay. This is where multiple countries and their scientists worked together to find out the SARS-CoV-19 sequencing data. Countries around the world, including India, worked together. They put their scientists on the job to do this. And India has also done the same. Now, this is not just about COVID-19. Fighting against any disease in the future would depend on how quickly can you find out their genome sequencing. And this exists even today. For example, the eyes of the world scientists is now focused on avian influenza. There has been a recent outbreak of this version as well in 2022. Because not many people got infected by it, people did not really take notice. But it was also because around the world, scientists have been able to apply the genome sequencing technologies to new disease as well. So it's a breakthrough movement that after COVID-19, many other viruses are now being detected, and their genome sequencing is being detected just because of this particular technique of genome sequencing. This is an infographic to make you understand how the process actually works, from taking a bacterial cell, from making sure that in the bacterial cell you release the DNA, purify the DNA, cut it into short segments, then multiply it so that it increases in numbers, and then you start to identify what exactly is the sequencing of this DNA. This brings us to the end of today's session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. A very important reminder, tomorrow 15th of August, national holiday, so we will not be having this session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. You have to join us day after tomorrow, that is on the 16th of August, where I'll be back with the next session of the analysis. But make sure you do attend and you do search about the homework that I gave you and try to write answers to these two practice questions right here in front of you. We'll now see you on the 16th of August. Very, very happy Independence Day in advance. Make sure that you do something that makes the entire country proud. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.